Um, I know that in the catalog this is called Baker's Dozen, which is actually 13 counts, not 12. But today I'd like to call this Noshing with Hamentaschen, or Noshing the Hamentaschen, because that's what we've been doing all week here as we try different recipes. This is a small display of some that we haven't eaten. We ate all of the ones that opened. So these are traditional poppy seed and fillings, and this filling is some pistachio nuts with pecans and apricot reduction jam preserves. So you can kind of make the fillings whatever you want. There's a whole history behind that as well. But for our time slot, I thought I should show you the dough that I'm making or using today, and then how to actually fill and bake, which I just turned my oven on. So one of the only downsides to, I believe, cooking or baking is that you do have to take your jewelry off. So, but other than that, it's a lot of fun. I forgot to do that as well, so my apologies. So the first thing you want to do, there's different types of doughs. I actually tried and looked up various doughs. Today you can modify anything and make something vegan or dairy-free. I chose a dough that I've used before, but I did try some other ones this week. The dough I'm using, I think we'll put it in the chat. It calls for room temperature butter, but some of the doughs call for very ice cold butter. Different doughs just call for different preparation techniques, but then most of the doughs do call for refrigeration after you assemble the doughs. It gives the butter time to kind of settle with the flour and everything, and it really does make a difference when it bakes up. So right here I have about 2 sticks of unsalted butter, and I actually go ahead and mix the butter before I add the sugar. I'm using a cup of just plain white sugar, and I'm just going to mix it really well. You can, of course, use a food processor. Most people nowadays do. I tend to just make it the way I was taught by my grandmother. So while I'm doing this, I'd like to discuss some of the history maybe a little bit of Hamentaschen, because of course this week I have looked into why we eat Hamentaschen, what they mean, and of course with anything Jewish there are a lot of backstories and variances and progressions as to how things were adapted and moved forward in different ways. There is the shape, which has meaning, and the fillings. Okay, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to interrupt myself and show you that this is nice and mixed and creamy. There's no lumps. This is just so far the sugar and the butter, but I'm going to add 2 eggs. The recipe calls for 1, but I used a little bit more butter.
Okay.
The dough tends to be very forgiving. You can add a little more of something or another if you need, and you can always add a little bit of water or orange juice if it's too dry. So I'm just going to add our eggs. And the assembling of the dough actually does not take so much time. It's just the fact that you really do have to refrigerate it. Some recipes call for a half an hour, some call for 3 hours. I think you can leave dough in the fridge for a few days before you use it. So I'm just really mixing it up. When Queen Esther, during Purim, we celebrate, of course, the story of Queen Esther, and we read the book of Esther, which is an amazing, dramatic, wild story. Oh, wow. And one of the things that she did to hide her Judaism, because she was living in fear of persecution, was she ate mostly a vegetarian diet. She ate a lot of seeds, which seeds, of course, are very sweet and symbolic for perseverance and life. And One of the reasons why we eat poppy seed filling Hamentaschen is for Queen Esther and her memory. Here's my eggs mixed into the batter. This is a very simple batter. All I'm going to put in the rest of this batter is a little bit of vanilla. And 2 other ingredients are a must, but you can add other things. So you see it's still very liquidy. Just mixing this with a fork, it's so easy to mix because I left my butter out last night. Now, the weather does sometimes impact your baking. You don't want to bake a cake on a rainy day. I'm not sure exactly why, but I do know that my butter, since it's cold in winter, right now my butter did not get as room tempy as I like. So I had to kind of cut it up a little before. This is salt, little salt. And now my flour. This is about a little shy of 3 cups of flour because I did add a little bit extra. Do I have a helper coming in? I have a helper coming in. This is Lori Suvalle. She's 11 and a temple member, master baker, and somewhat of a historian as well. So she can maybe help me with some of the history that we're going to talk about. And I'm just going to mix. And I'm going to keep mixing this a little bit with the fork, and then I'm going to wash my hands and mix it and fold it a little bit by hand. When I'm done doing this, I'll show you what it looks like, maybe in different stages. But in the meantime, woo, magic, we already have some.
While you're rolling out the dough, Lori, we had a question coming in, which is wondering, is it important to use unsalted or salted butter?
I would say, in my opinion, it's better to use unsalted butter and add salt. I don't know why I think that, but all of the recipes that I see for baking use unsalted butter and then you add salt. So I think if you only had salted butter, it would probably be fine.
But then maybe you just don't add the salt separately.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Some things bake up differently, so you don't really taste the salt even though you're adding it. So
looking good, Suvalles. Looking good.
Thanks. So we're gonna, when we need a large surface to roll out this dough. So Sylvie's gonna flour the counter and then start rolling out the dough. Do you want your roller? And now you can use any kind of juice glass to cut out your Hamentaschen rounds. Even though they're triangular, you're gonna cut out round shapes. So we used to just use these glasses, these juice glasses. You can use a larger cup. We'll talk about what the size does to the cookie when you bake it, but we purchased for like $8 these cookie cutters online. So you can use whatever ones you like, just make sure to use a couple of the big ones. And then when we're done, we'll just throw the cutouts on our baking sheet. And when we get a few of them going, we're gonna take a dish towel. This is a squirt bottle, but you could just run it under the water. And our dough, even though it's forgiving and we can add to it and modify it a little bit, we don't want it to dry out and crack before we fold them. So we're gonna take a towel, and a moist towel, and we're gonna cover our rounds a little bit while we make more so they don't dry out on us.
Hey, Lori, sorry to interrupt you. We had a question. They asked, did she say she added 3 cups of flour versus the 2 1/4 in the recipe? I know you said it was giving, so they want to.
Yes, I did. So one thing I have found is that I read about 6 different recipes this week, and I tried 3. And all of them made nice doughs. They really did. I kind of look at a recipe and eyeball it more or less. And because I tend to do that, I don't follow the recipes directly after the first time that I make them. Usually I just put about that much. So especially with the dough, it's not gonna do anything so different if you add an extra egg, and then if you can tell by the way it's supposed to look that it's too sticky, you can add a little more flour, or when you're rolling out the dough, you can add the flour then if it's still a little too sticky. So it's forgiving. You can add dough or you can add flour in different stages if something doesn't seem quite right. And we're gonna heavily flour the surface so that so that the rounds do pick up nicely, and so that we can now. A lot of times, recipes will say if you take your dough and you put it in a disc like this, you can kind of pound it. Can I pound it just once or twice for you before you start? You kind of pound it flat so that it's even, and turn it as you pound it so that each side gets a nice. So it's all even. Now, most people try to start and make this round the whole time. If it starts to crack in the corners, you can wet your hands a little bit and kind of push those cracks closed and roll it more and more. But what's going to happen eventually, and you don't have to be such a perfectionist, because what's going to happen is you are going to get offshoot pieces that are not round that you can still use. You can use a smaller cutter for maybe a piece that's sprouted out this way. It doesn't matter, because in the end, you're going to take all of your dough that you didn't use for the cutouts, and you're just going to kind of mash it together again and roll it out so that you can still get more pieces. So you'll see as we go, because this part and the folding is the hardest parts, really. There's just a few tips really with Hamentaschen, and the biggest one that I can say is do not overload your filling. If anything, there should, once you make the folds, be a teeny bit of space in there, because your fillings are going to bubble up a little as they cook. They're still going to taste just as delicious if they open up or if they flow over. But if you want them to look even and nice, this is actually a Hershey's Kiss in the middle, so we don't have to worry about those. So sometimes we just do those and it's easy. We don't have to worry about any runoff. But if you really want to avoid the fillings coming out, then just use less instead of more. You want to start rolling that out a little? I also have an egg wash. So we're going to use that as, it offers a nice glaze, a light glaze, but it also helps the sides stick together when you fold them. So one of the recipes that I read this week said, do not pinch, fold when you're assembling the cookies. And I thought, that's kind of silly. Of course you need to pinch. I've always pinched. So I made a batch and I pinched and half of them opened, which again, they just are just as delicious. But then I made the next batch folded, and none of them really came out. So so that was a good lesson. And just because I've been baking for a long time doesn't mean I don't sometimes totally mess up. That's normal too. There's a lot of science involved. So, but it's always fun, you know, especially these days for us to experiment and try new things. And when we thought about Purim and the dramatic, crazy, wild, very intricate story of Purim, and we saw the origin of the Hamentaschen. In Israel, they're called Oznei Haman. I might be saying that wrong, but that kind of.
Yeah, that's correct. The ears of Haman.
Yes, his ears. So there was an Italian custom hundreds of centuries ago, hundreds of years ago, where if they hurt someone or hung them or something, they would cut off their ears. So we say someone who wanted to kill us will eat his ears. Okay. They had a lot of, you know, Mises. I'll eat your ears. I don't know. So then it became Haman's pockets. And Mon in German means poppy seed, and a Taschen is like a pocket, I believe. We have some notes somewhere about this, but so it kind of evolved. There was in like the 14th or 15th century, there was a prune farmer who sold some bad prunes, and he was a Jewish man, and they were very mad because people got poisoned, but he was then acquitted, so they celebrated even more and started putting prunes in the Hamentaschen. So, you know, things steadily have evolved. Now people put all kinds of things. We made a Rolo Mentaschen. You can put whatever you like in the middle. You can do savory in the middle. There's actually a strong connection of Hamentaschen to Kreplach. The three sides have spiritual meaning as well. It's really fun research to kind of explore if you haven't done that. But do you want to? Do you mind if I flatten this out just a little more? Okay.
Lori, we also got a question, wondering, have you ever tried sealing something or working with the dough for a wash that is an egg wash, if somebody has an allergy, perhaps? Have you
Yes.
tried anything else?
So there's something called Just Egg. It's like a vegan egg that can help bind, but you don't really need to. And you could use just a simple sugar, would probably bind the dough pretty nicely. But some of the recipes call for cornstarch. So if you make the dough kind of thick, I would suggest using a larger cutter. And if you make the dough thin, you don't have to cook it as long, but I would be careful about the amount of filling you put in. You're going to get a crispier dough if you go ahead and go thin, and if you make a heavier kind of scone type of cookie, then you're going to cook it longer, and you might want to put more of a sweet because it's so dense. But I would make those bigger. Do you want to start cutting some of them out? I think our oven is ready. So I'm going to help you and we'll do a couple. When you're done, just throw them over onto here. So they lift off real nice. I'm going to pat off some of the dough and start stacking them. These are quite thin, so they won't need to cook as long. This one is thin on this side, a little thicker on this side. If I want, I can take my rolling pin and even it out, or even just kind of do that with my fingers there. And because we already have a few here, I'm just going to go ahead and cover them with my damp cloth. I'm going to make a smaller one here. They just pop out pretty easily. The smaller ones, I would not put much in the middle at all. Let's make one real big one. So once we use all of this dough, we really can take it, I think so. And I know we have a little more space here, but I just want to show you how forgiving this dough is. Even though it has flour all over it, if I feel like it's not going to go ahead and cooperate, I can even just wet my hands a little bit, and it's going to make the dough kind of stick together. Yeah, it's going to work with me. And then I'm going to bring forward a little bit more of my flour. And even though I'm getting some pieces that are resisting, I'm going to mash them all together. And sometimes you can flour and I'm going to smash them just a little. And then I'm going to kind of just nicely force them a little more into another small batch, right? You want to finish this off? And if any pieces break off, you really can just kind of make them into another piece. So the dough really is cooperative. If you want to cut some more or push it down, and then I'll show how you can kind of start. Now you can use a special tool. When I start folding these, I feel like you have to expedite the process and move quickly once you've got your fillings. So we have quite a few fillings. We have preserves, apricot and red raspberry. We have poppy seed, which is more traditional. And then we have M&Ms, malt balls, chocolate covered almonds. So I think we'll just drop some in the middle. This time we tried, these are mint candies. This is just roasted pecans and pistachios and some sesame seeds roasted with maple syrup and a little bit of avocado oil and honey, probably. So this is kind of just a no-brainer. You can put this on salads and stuff, but also just drop this in with a little preserves. It's perfect. you want to cut some more out so we can start filling, or do you want to fill? Okay, so cut a couple more. You want to be careful to never get any flour on the bottom of your trays here that are going in the oven. And then what I do is I just get the eggs a little bit foamy. You can use one of these brushes, or you can just use your fingers and just, just get a little bit, not too much, a thin layer of that egg wash on there. And I am pretty sure that you can use the vegan eggs. You can also substitute either vinegar or vegan eggs for the dough. There's, I definitely saw 2 or 3 nice vegan recipes, as well as like gluten-free. So,
Lori, we just have a minute left. I'm so sorry to rush you.
Oh, okay, let me show you how we fold these, because that's the best part. So let's just take an M&M, and we're going to, I don't know if you can see the way I'm doing this, but I'm going to fold the first one so that it almost looks like a little flower or a cornucopia kind of cone. And then I'm going to take and just fold the other 2 forward. And there's a Hamentaschen that just needs to be baked. So we'll do another one. An almond, chocolate covered almond. I'm going to just fold that perfectly on the top like this, and it flares out like a hoop dress or something. And then I'm just going to fold one on top of the other, and just make sure that I push one completely over the other one. And there you go. It's just a perfect little pocket there. Let's see. I'm gonna fold one. There we go, a blue one for Israel. And Purim is early this year. It's the end of February.
Yeah, it's in basically 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Well,
really have a good time on Purim.
Thank you, Lori and Sylvie.
Thank you so much.